Hey, Jack, thanks for coming in and doing this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into this conversation, which I'm super stoked for, I want the audience to see your new trailer for your film. This is going to be Tracing the Divide. Check it out.
There's something about a bike, that just clicks.
Through a divide, they ride all the way from Canada to Mexico. I knew I had to do it. I didn't know when or how, but I knew I was going to do it.
2,400 miles, 0% done.
It's on. It's on!
At some point in time, the walls start to fall away and you stop trying to be the adult.
Make no bones about it. This is hard. Mentally hard.
You only fail if you don't come away learning something from it.
I've heard many people say that they come through this ride changed. Do I want to do 12 more days of this?
If I didn't come away with that intangible beatdown I'm looking for, feel like I have an epiphany on a bike, that's a fail for me.
This is what it's all about! You're not in this on your own.
All right, Jack, so what's your story?
Oh, man. So I'm a documentary filmmaker based out of Grand Junction, Colorado.
Mecca.
Yep. Mecca of filmmaking here in Colorado. No, actually what brought me out to Grand Junction, Colorado in general, was I was a very competitive cyclist, a road cyclist. And so I went to the CMU, Colorado Mesa University, to pursue cycling, road cycling specifically, but also to study film and photography. And so the major that I kind of went for was, it's like film, animation, photography, and something else. So I say it's like it was going to be a film degree, but it was kind of a plethora of things.
So you went for cycling, and then the art kind of came second.
I mean, photography and film and all that kind of stuff was always going to come after my time of cycling. And once that wrapped up, then yeah, I was going to dive into the film world. And so I applied to the Colorado Mesa University for the road team. And I was like, yeah, this is a really, really good team. I'm not sure it's going to happen or I'm going to make this, but I really wanted to give it a shot. And somehow they decided to take me on. And so I remember being like, yes, I'm in, but I got to make sure that they have, something for my other passion, after this sport's done. And they had that film and photography and animation and whatever. It was like a 4-step thing. So I came here and only lasted a semester.
Was it film stuff just not great? I mean, what was the...
Oh, man. So...
Tell us about film school, because I'm not a huge advocate, but some of them I am, but...
Right. Well, I mean, I never actually made it to anything film related, basically, but...
You never made it to a film class?
No, not one. So basically, it was just the gen ed. So I went, absolutely loved the team, loved the school, but I remember sitting there in my 3D Foundations class, and it was like the teacher gave us a big old pot and said, all right, we're going to learn how to carve this certain statue. And we're going to learn 3D foundations in this. And I remember I was just sitting there in class digging this, this clay sculpture. And I went, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, I'm paying right now to do this. I need to make a change. I'm going to decide to leave school after this semester, and I'm going to go for photography originally, but I'm just going to pursue travel, film, and photography.
So you drop out of college. What'd your parents say?
They were really supportive, actually. I think my mom always kind of had a feeling I was going to do it, but she thought, maybe I just finish the 4 years and then do that. So I wasn't necessarily a shock for them, but because they kind of knew me well and knew how antsy I get, and actually just really ultra supportive of my decisions.
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 22. So this was all when I was about 19 years old.
All right. So you drop out of college.
Yep.
After the first semester of film school.
Yep.
Road cycling ends. What do you do next?
Man, so I mean, I didn't really no, I didn't have a step plan, but all I knew, and I think it was definitely a God thing, but I was like, you know what? I am going to pursue travel photography and film. I had a huge passion for wanting to explore the world, have a camera along with me. Now, did I know how to make a job out of this or anything like that? No, not a clue. However, I knew that it was possible. So I said, you know what? I've actually never left the country. So that's probably what I should do first, is figure out how much do I actually like this. Now I jumped off the deep end. There's no going back to school at that point, but I was like, and I knew I was going to like it, but I needed to know how much I did and to see like if this is something I want to keep pursuing or pivot.
Do you think that the whole travel thing was more generated from like the Instagram world and like these travel influencers? I mean, how much, cause you hadn't traveled, so you really didn't know if it was what
totally
was real.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in high school, just always looking at that stuff and be like, this is fascinating. This is a lifestyle that I want to look into and explore. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that after my cycling. Like I want to explore the world and do that and just see what that world's like. And I was going to do that after cycling, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fast forward basically. And so, yeah, just Instagram, seeing that all. And I was like, I think there's something here for me. I'm going to go to explore it. And I decided that I'm going to go do that.
And so how do you take your first step in that?
A lot of research. I was like, well, I got to get out of the country. So what's a great first step? And I picked Costa Rica. I was like, you know what? I'm going to backpack a country that in a place where it will make me somewhat uncomfortable, but is still safe enough to do that first kind of step. And I was, 19 years old. So to chose Costa Rica, I don't speak any Spanish. And I was like, this is a great opportunity to kind of put myself a little bit out of the comfort zone and bring a camera and just document everything I see and do, and just take that as my first kind of step to learning what this lifestyle and world is like.
And what was that lifestyle like?
I loved it. Now, I remember being like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure. Like, how do I monetize any of this? But all I knew was I am loving the process of traveling and going on an adventure, making yourself uncomfortable and backpacking. I didn't do it luxurious at all. I did like $2,500 for 5 weeks, backpacked, walked everywhere. I'm going to walk 7-8 miles a day, just taking photos of everything I saw and just documenting and enjoying the process of seeing something foreign and then putting it on a camera, on a still, and loved the process.
What did you learn?
The photography and that aspect and the art, I learned, things like that, like framing, of course, you quickly learn that kind of stuff, but I actually learned how to travel. What I found was a lot of these guys who kind of go into this, they know how to travel. Like they know how to leverage different things, but also like I took a bus system again across Costa Rica and don't know any Spanish. And what that forces you to do is like mature up and like risk versus reward and things like that. Like those little micro decisions that you have to make every day when you're doing stuff like that and backpacking, I learned super quickly, but I kind of just dove and did it.
How many photos did you take?
Hundreds. You could look at my old Instagram. There's just Costa Rica photos all the time. And it was just me posting and just seeing what I enjoyed as an artist and coming up with your style. I think what happens is when you just shoot and there's not really any pressure to perform for a client or whatever, which I didn't have. I had money saved aside that I was going to spend on college, but because I left, I had, a pool of cash that I was kind of like somewhat my safety net. It wasn't a ton, but I was like, I can go and do this trip for 5 weeks and just not have to worry about anything and just really appreciate the art and not have to perform for anyone except myself. And so you quickly figure out what your style is and what you really love.
So you learned to travel, kind of picked up these tricks of like what to bring, what not to bring.
Right.
What's a burden.
Right. How
do you throw it on the top of a bus, whatever.
Right.
So
totally.
Did you ditch anything? Did you have anything with you that you were like, I'm not taking this any further?
It was pretty lean. I had my drone and my Mavic Air, my Mavic Air 2 and my Canon R6. That was it. That's all I brought. And so there wasn't really much I couldn't have brought. And my little app and my iPad. So I didn't have a laptop. So I just had a little iPad, plugged in my SD card in with, this little converter, and I would edit all my photos like I was drawing on my iPad. And that's the only 3 things I brought for to do creative work.
All right. So you get back from there, and then how do you take an action step next? Like what was the next?
So this is kind of where my career, you make micro decisions through your careers. And mine was 2 cyclists approached me. One was my old cycling coach. And I had just gotten back from this trip, and he told me, he's like, hey, me and my best friend, Chris Hebert, we're going to ride from the border of Canada all the way to Mexico. So it's going to be like this giant adventure, unsupported, on our bikes, pedal bikes, you know. And would you like to document this? Would you just, that's all they really pitched me. And I was like, that's interesting, but I'm not really sure. I don't really want to, no, didn't fit the lifestyle that I saw myself in.
Yeah.
So I kind of just pushed it off the side and said, I'll think about it. But then I returned a couple weeks later and been like, you know what? This is the next step I can take in my career. You know, I left college. I have to find another avenue of education, and that was more of experience. Now I had enrolled in different courses and things like that to find different outlets of education, but some of the best, you have to kind of just go out and experience yourself. So this was going to be a form of a documentary. And I was like, you know, this doesn't quite fit how I picture myself going, but you know what? I'm going to go for it. They agreed that they would just cover my expenses, you know, my gas and food and whatnot. You know what? I'm going to do it. And so I drove from Colorado, put their bikes in, drove up to the border of Canada and started this thing.
There is one part of the story that you're not telling that I want to get into real quick. So you said, maybe I'll do it. And then there's this gap of time, and then you go do this film.
Right.
So you had told me you took this online course, but then ended up going back to Costa Rica. I just want to touch base on that because it's kind of a funny story.
After my first trip to Costa Rica, there was a Facebook group that I had enrolled in. It was Colder Creative. This is course. This guy named Sam Colder created this course called Colder Creative. And what that course is designed is to give guys who are interested in what I was in, so like travel, influencing, and brand work, a way to learn and meet a community of people. And so I rolled into this course, and they had a Facebook group, and there was an invite from this guy named Robin. And he set out a message and said, hey, I'm going to go to Costa Rica. Who wants to come? And I'm never on Facebook often. I saw it and I went, there's something here. I was like, I just went, but I went alone. I want to go and see that with other filmmakers who people were like in the same boat I am. Young guys who just want to get hungry. And because I had developed a portfolio and things like that in the first trip to Costa Rica, I kind of had my own portfolio, understood the country, and I said, you know what, I'm in. And 7 other strangers said yes too.
One of the key roles that I think makes documentaries work in these environments is a fixer, is finding somebody who's been there or done it or has experience that can fast track a lot of the problems. So were you kind of a fixer on that trip?
This trip, how do I put this? Like, we all are really young guys, including myself. I'm 19 years old. And yes, I knew the country, but we all had different ideas of, you know, the projects that we wanted to do. So I had a certain opinion, and these guys had certain opinions, and it created definitely some inner conflict. But what I think I did a good job of helping them understand what we're going to run into and things like that, and point into different places that I thought were going to be really great on camera. But none of us knew each other. I mean, that's why this trip of a lifetime is so fascinating, was all 8 of us, there's 2 guys who knew each other, but that was about it. All of us went to Costa Rica, all strangers, and we had literally just met at a hostel in San Jose after we had just flown. I mean, there was a couple guys from Europe, a guy from Wisconsin, myself, a guy from Denver, a couple Belgian guys, and a German guy. So it was like
The start of a joke.
Right. Absolutely. And so we just meet there without knowing each other.
And the goal was, and then one of the guys had gotten some corporate money, $2,000 or $3,000 from different people pitching this idea.
Right. So we got different. So Robin, he's pretty savvy in like pitching ideas. And so he reached out to couple different companies. So it was like Corona, the beer company, Nomadic, the bag company, and then Music Bed. We had a little gig with them. What happened was he pitched this idea to these different clients. He's like, hey, 8 of us strangers from this course called Colder Creative, we're going to get together in Costa Rica. A lot of these companies, they kind of hear everything. If you can pitch them an idea that they're like, oh, this is interesting. Like, heck yeah, we'll give you, you know, a few $1,000s to go and.
It's a total flyer for a Corona.
Right. But
don't care.
When we're talking about a company that big or even Nomadic, it's like, sure, like see what you guys come up with. That was like, we had 3.5 weeks, and it was like 7-8 different pieces of content or whatever that we had to produce. And if you know anything, that's a lot of work for 3.5 weeks. And of course, we're all young guys. We don't take the first week serious. So we're down to 2.5 weeks just crunching. I mean, the adventures that we had running around the country for different locations and things that fell through. And on top of that, we leveraged those brands or whatever to stay in like crazy luxurious villas. I mean, there was one villa we reached out to, it was like $4 or $5 grand a night on this giant mountain of, you know, on top of this jungle looking over. And we reached out and we're like, hey, we want to like do some work in your villa. Would you let us stay? And he's like, yeah, sure. And we're like, how much do you need? And he's like, oh, just give me like 50, $100 each, like a person. And we'll call it good, just to cover, you know, the maid or whatever.
And so he wanted it to be able to show off the villa in the
Right.
commercial, and then to say, oh, my house is in a Corona commercial.
Right.
So you go down there, you crank out for 3.5 weeks or 3 weeks, and then you produce this content. What did you learn when you walked away from that as a filmmaker?
Oh man. So, I mean, that trip was the huge first step of film school for me, which is the real life experience. Was first off, it's working with a team. Everyone needs roles. Like we didn't really have roles, for example. We all just wanted to always be on the camera shooting and whatever, but everyone had, needed to have a role and we just didn't do that. And that created a lot of confusion, things like that. So then we just learned how to work as a team, who was good at what, things like that. That was first and foremost. And one of the biggest lessons I learned. Second is just like also leveraging other things to other opportunities. So like leveraging the client to get their location, and then your location to, of course, get the high end content that you want. That trip was by far just one of the biggest adventures and absolute messes I've ever been in, but one of the most fun and rewarding things as well. Because then I got friends for life. You go through something like that. I mean, it's, definitely a couple of those friends, I'm like, holy cow. Like, I just know so well now.
When you start filmmaking and you find your tribe, you find your group that you want to create with, and then you have shared experience with those people and you understand how they interact within hard circumstances, we call them foxhole friends, is that they're those people that can get through it and you're going to be able to get things accomplished because people can figure it out. But I think the interesting side is when you take a bunch of people who want to be the director, producer, in the creative roles, but really they're maybe just better as a producer or a location scout or those things. I think a lot of people just can't see that and realize like, I want to be on the team and that's what really matters. And I'm really good at this.
Right. And
being in an environment where you can evaluate and look at each other's work and say, actually, Jack, you shoot this, 'cause it's like, it's going to look better if you do it.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to not think I could do everything perfectly.
Yeah. And even I learned lessons about myself. I mean, there was times where I was trying to take control when I was like, and then I look back and I'm like, what was I doing? Like this guy was clearly better for this part of the journey or whatever. Like I was the photographer, clearly. Like that's what I really loved at that time. So I did all the photos, and that worked out well. But then there would be times where I was like trying to take control when you just got to let go and let the other guy who's more qualified or who's going to make this whole system and operation go smoother, let him do it. And I learned that like bar fun. After that, I was like, oh gosh, yeah. Like I have to understand to like, this person's more suited for this job and not me.
So you get back from Costa Rica and start pursuing Tracing the Divide. Yes.
So Tracing the Divide was by far the start of my whole, career actually. And, the things that I've done before, these different travels definitely helped me for this next challenge. But this is where it all kind of started for me, was these guys. I decided, I'm going to do this thing. And so I say yes. And then I meet them up at the border of Canada, like this route called the Tour Divide route. It's this ultra famous like route for bikepackers or adventure cyclists. And it's like the Tour de France of bikepacking.
For cyclists, I think you were talking about how this is one of those bucket list things. Like if you're a climber, you go to Yosemite, and that's a big thing. Like for bikepackers, this is your Yosemite. This is your World Cup.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like if you're into bikepacking, this is the ride, this is the magnum opus of bikepacking in a lot of ways. And, there's a race every single year, in June that you have, 20, 30 guys who are just like not sleeping, that's the type of route an environment that this creates every June. But we did it in August. This wasn't part of the race. Like these are just two guys who wanted to go on an adventure. And, we're middle-aged guys who are like, we want to have a huge challenge ahead of us.
You have a topic,
right?
You have a timeline, a ticking clock, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 characters. And why did you, so, you know, in documentary, we always kind of say, find some characters that are on a journey and they're trying to solve a problem or get to a destination or whatever it is. I mean, you have all the components, but the first thing is the characters. How did you know that these guys would be interesting and not boring on camera? I mean, you had to have some kind of nuance, like this might be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, my experience for documentary was 0. I had none. I had literally just have been only dipping my toe in the travel influencer world. But I really believed that there was an opportunity here. Now, these 2 guys, one was my old cycling coach, so I knew him really well. Another was a friend, didn't know him quite as well at the beginning of this, but they had very distinct personalities. And I remember being like, yeah, they have personalities, and let's just give this a go. Like, I was young enough where it just was another opportunity. There wasn't a huge amount of risk for me. And they were like, hey, we just want you to document this. And it's going to be kind of for like our families and friends, like to show. So I was like, there wasn't a lot of expectations. The only expectations was on myself.
So they kind of wanted a home video.
Right. They were like, yeah, whatever you come up with, great. That's all. And so I was like, okay, there's not a lot of pressure. This is a really awesome opportunity to see the United States, the Western United States. Yeah, I think I'm going to give this everything I got.
It's interesting. I think sometimes when we do these docs, it's like we want to go in and it's high risk, high reward, all these different things. And then there's things like this where they have a support truck if anything goes wrong. They have somebody that, I mean, you kind of were a safety net. And then the film kind of became the secondary thing that you're shooting a home movie. They know you don't have that much experience.
Yeah.
And so the expectations are super low. Those are great projects because you're kind of freed up from all the logistics of money and impact strategies and distribution. You don't have any of that. You're just telling a story.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was super fortunate. I mean, we went into it being like, I'm not here to support you guys. I mean, I told them, I was very frank with you guys. I said, if you guys fall and start bleeding out, unless you're like literally going to die, I'm just going to record you. And so we had that mutual thing where like, you're not supported. I'm not here to carry your pizza boxes and things like that. Like you're on your own, but, can't really predict everything that's going to happen. It's just, you can't. Like, it's every single day is going to be different. And there's no way you can, other than knowing the route, you can't predict that. So it was every single day, like, you just had to prepare for the next in any way you can.
You have an idea, you develop it, you've gone through all the logistics, you're going to have to drive 9,000 miles, all these different things. You got to get a truck. You have a truck. It's all that stuff. So then you get into the gear, lodging, food, all those things. Like, how did you deal with lodging? What equipment did you bring? How did you you're a one-man band?
Yeah. When I went into this knowing that I'm going to be a one-man band, I'm not going to get help. I had to really kind of creatively think about how I'm going to do this. And so there's kind of 2 parts about it. It's the equipment and it's the vehicle. The camera equipment, I decided it's just going to be super lean. I wasn't going to spend a bunch of money. I wasn't going to go buy a red or anything like that. I was just going to stick with what I had, which was a Canon R6. I bought one lens for it, a 15-35. I brought this 18-400, Tamron lens that I never actually even used really. And my Rode NTG mic, little battery grip. So I'm sitting there with my main A camera. It's this Canon R6 and a battery grip and a little NTG mic on top. No monitors, nothing. That was it. That was the A camera. Then I decided, you know what? I kind of want to have an aerial. So I had this Mavic Air 2 that I bought, a year ago. And it's like, great, this is awesome. And then I had some GoPros. That's all the camera equipment I decided to bring them, my little crappy PC computer, So
you've moved from an iPad to
I did. You
upgraded.
I don't know if that was actually any of an upgrade, but yeah. And then, it's one of those PCs where you open up and the fans just go nuts. It's like, can't even read C-Log footage. So, but I was like, this is what I got. I'm going to make it work. And then it came the vehicle, which is the Toyota Tacoma. And I was like, I'm going to have to off-road this thing. I'm going to follow these people as much as I possibly can. And outfitted it, put every off-road thing I can think of that I needed, wrenches and things like that. And built out the back of the Toyota Tacoma. The back, it's a 6-foot, bed, access cab. So I built these, with my dad, built these giant shelves that you put back there, put my little memory foam mattress in between the shelves and my blankets and pillows and a little desk. And that was my home. for the duration of the film.
How'd you deal with power?
Yeah, bought a little like this Jackery. It's like 1,000-watt Jackery, and was like, this is my power bank, and was able to charge everything I needed off that thing.
So that's like a battery.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like a car battery that you can plug stuff into that you can take into a hotel, maybe charge it up, and then
so it lasts 3 or 4 days, and then I would plug it in, recharge it, and keep going, just recycling it, because you're in the middle of nowhere every day.
So you said at some point you were staying in hotels and then back in the truck and going back and forth, and then you kind of made a decision.
Yeah, well, I made it early. I'm not going to live in anything other than this topper every night. And 2 reasons: I loved camping, but also it was a sense of normalcy every single day. So when you're doing documentaries or things like that, it's every day is different, right? You don't even know where you're going to stay or things like that. And that's exhausting. And what I found was, like, if I can just stay in one spot every single night and have one variable that I can control that will stay the exact same every single day, I think it was just going to, help mentally. That's what I decided to do. So every single day of the entire film, I didn't stay at any hotels through the film process, and slept in my Tacoma every night.
What'd you do for food?
Yeah, brought my little stove, my cooking stove, and then had that, and then would eat at restaurants or gas stations as we went on. But I mean, yeah, just flipping pancakes on the back of my, little tailgate, and cooked food when I needed to and stuff. Had this big old 5-gallon of water that I refill every 4 or 5 days, and that was my food situation.
All right, so you've got the journey that you're going on with these guys, and then you've got it. Ultimately, after a few drone shots, you got to tell a story.
Right. Yeah.
So how did you tell the story? How did you figure out how to capture their story within the dynamics? I've done, as I said, those cycling films, and when guys are on bikes, it's super hard to tell that story. How did you do it with this? What were some tricks that you could suggest that helped you kind of thread the needle?
Well, some tricks I had to find was each camera was a different tool for a different purpose. So my A camera, the Canon R6, served a different purpose, obviously, than the drone, and then the GoPro served a different purpose. And I remember for the first few days, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I am a one-man band. No one can drop me off, and, I can't shoot outside the window necessarily while someone's driving. I was like, I remember, and then there was a tree, that went over the road, and I got blocked like an hour into the ride. And I went, oh my gosh, what did I sign up for? Like, I don't know how I'm going to tell any of this story. I can't even be there for it. And then I was like, you know what?
Did you just have to backtrack?
Yeah. You just backtrack. I mean, I would either try to just go over it or toe strap and pull the tree out, or turn around and figure out a way around it. And most of the time you would just either really sweat and try to get over it, or you would just leave and get around it. And I would just been like, crap, what am I doing? And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to give these 2 GoPros to these 2 guys and say, hey, this is your journal entry. This is like your diary, basically. I said, I can't be there for every single thing. It's not possible. So anything funny, anything stupid, anything, document it. Like, vlog it, basically. Everyone's familiar with vlogging. It's like, just treat it like it's like your friend, And I also knew them really well. And so I wasn't getting what I wanted out of them because I was just like a family member, a friend. It's hard when you're and I quickly realized, like 2 days in, I was like, I don't know what I'm getting. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done a documentary before.
Well, it's interesting. I think when we know people, they assume we know people. Like, I did this interview with some people's parents recently. They want us to interview their parents. And I said, well, why don't you guys just ask them? They said they won't answer the question because they assume we know the answer because we've just been with them.
Or they'll answer it different, not the truth. Most of the time they'll play up to it.
Or a version of the story.
Exactly. And so I quickly realized that. And so I gave them the GoPros, and I was like, hey, this is your journal entry. I don't care how stupid it is. I have funny little things of them, like with their, cycling tights and bibs, they're running off into the woods to go take a crap, and they're laughing and having fun. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I needed, because it's like that element of vulnerability that you can't get because I'm just a best friend or whatever. And so that quickly became one aspect or one tool that I was like, perfect. And then the drone was to marry the cinematic aspect of this route, this grand ride with, the raw GoPro footage, or this vulnerability. NACAM was, you know, again, more of that cinematic verite moments, kind of capturing things that I was there for. You know, I was there for most of every experience, but there was a lot of little things that made the film that are just absolute gold because I decided to, and that's just what I found. You have to, you know, find the different tools and then serve those tools for the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the rough cut. I haven't seen the final, but I've seen 2 versions of it. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I really enjoyed about it was that it's not a GoPro film. It's you really use that to accelerate the story forward, and then you're up in the sky, seeing the big picture. You're experiencing what they're going through from like an observational, and then all of a sudden you're in this intimate moment with them, right. And it's this kind of journey you go through in those 3 elements that kind of weave the film together, right. Through this epic. I mean, your setting is off the charts.
And then I appreciate it. Like I remember looking at the footage and I was like, I could start seeing the pieces somewhat coming together. But I remember telling the guys, I said, listen guys, like, you know, the 2 cyclists that I was with, I was like, you guys aren't like being vulnerable at all. Like every time you see me, you clam up or anything like that. I said, you guys just need to relax and like, you know, and then we eventually got to a point where they understood like, hey, I'm here to document the journey. Like let's actually document what's actually going on and what's in your head and how you're feeling and things like that. And then the camera starts to disappear. And then I was like, what's a beauty about my situation with this film is it was a journey. You know, we have a point A and a point Z, and we're going to follow this journey. And this is it. Like it gave me a start and an ending point. And those guys also saw that. And so what happened was we all just started to realize like, hey, let's document what's really happening. And that's what ended up, going on. And, you know, in my pre-production process of this, I kind of seen what other Tour Divide films are out there. You know, this isn't a foreign thing for someone to document a journey across this route. It's that famous. And what I found was you have these cyclists who are doing FKT attempts or fastest known times. They're just going as hard as they can. They're not sleeping or anything like that. And it's just a film of them going as hard as they can. I was like, my guys aren't that. My guys are just like 2, guys from Wisconsin. You know, they're really great cyclists, but average Joes. And, you know, they're just 2 buddies going along the route. Like this is not an FKT attempt.
Well, it's interesting because if you make a film like that, you're competing with like Free Solo.
Right.
You know, you're competing with a film that has to be so epic and so, you know, fastest times and those things that your demographic, your audience, when you do films that are so niche that only so many people are going to be inspired by it. But when you make a human interest story and you really go into the average person that I can relate to, those documentaries typically do really well outside of a genre of cycling or whatever. It's no longer a story about a sport. It's a human interest story of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, you know, you had these guys who are what it was originally was and how it felt was like a midlife crisis. You know, you have these, 45, 46-year-old guys who are, it will look like they're just in tights riding their bikes across the US, that looks like a midlife crisis to a lot of people. And they would always joke about that on camera. And one thing in the edit specifically is we cut all that because what we realized and what the writers is, this is not a midlife crisis. No, this is a midlife purpose. And I sat with our producer, which we'll talk about, and we were like, hey, this is not a midlife crisis. There's no negative connotation to what you guys did. This is you guys being like, hey, we want another challenge and we want purpose, which is, as small as it may look for other people, they wanted to complete this ride and learn something about themselves and push themselves past the line or past the limit. So it became a purpose, not a crisis.
Yeah, you see that a lot with, as you start to cast documentaries, you start to see that there's age brackets. So from 20 to 30, you're trying to figure out who you are and what you want to be and be known for and accomplish. And then your 30s to 40s, you start accomplishing that. From the 40s to 50s, you start to go, okay, what on earth am I here for?
Right.
And then at 50, you have your halftime conversation. So as you're starting to look at cast of documentaries, you can kind of see what people are going through. By 50, you've kind of lived a majority of your, third of your life. And so you start going, hey, the clock's ticking. you're asking, you're visiting, you'll see people in their 50s start to visit their parents' graves and things. As stark as that sounds, they go, I know that's going to happen to me one day. What am I going to do with the amount of time I have left?
Right.
And so these guys are kind of in that cross pattern. I mean, what are they, doctors and lawyers? I mean,
yeah, doctor and engineers. So these are guys who have stable homes. But what happened was, I think it's like, days become the same day after day. And they were brave enough and courageous enough to like, hey, let's change it up and let's do something, like, let's not be like, oh, we'll do that in 5 years. Like they just went and they were like, we're going to do this now. And I, as a filmmaker, when I'm watching this, I'm new to documentary. And then I just start realizing like, I'm going to have not only my own journey, but I'm going to like learn something from their journey. And I don't want to spoil the film or anything, but what I realize is like, you can be 45, you could be 70, you could be 13. You're still figuring things out. You're always figuring something out. And that's what's so apparent in this film is like, you can see the gears turning and they're like, oh, they're still learning things about themselves and things that they want to change. And that, quickly became what I was there for, just to show.
Yeah. There's two things. One is human nature is really interesting because as a documentary person, we watch people. That's what we do for a living is we watch what they do, their eye contacts, how do they approach other people? Because they're telling us their story without using words. And so we end up in you start to develop these skills of watching people. Anna Leibovitz, this famous photographer, she documented the Rolling Stones. So she spent months and months with these guys and she couldn't get the photos and just was having a hard time. And she said, when I started getting the photos that became famous is when they forgot I was there. I can tell in the front end of this film, they're kind of acting like they've got their persona and then they forget you're there.
Yeah.
And they kind of buy into this idea that's bigger than a home video and realize that this might be interesting down the road. But when did they forget you were there to some degree?
Yeah. I mean, it took days. And so, again, like when you're making a film, you got to make all these micro decisions. And that's why I had to give them like some sort of outlet, which was the GoPros cause I have to remove myself. Cause yes, they are going to give you what they think you want. And that's one step, pretty quickly I had to figure that out. But then, eventually it got easier. Like as the film goes on, I figured out what I needed to start doing. I needed, where I need to be. You get a flow and a system and then they forget you're there and then you're just off to the races, because if you want to actually capture emotion, you probably won't get anything that you really, really need in the first few days. Cause it's going to be kind of all, I wouldn't say fake, but a certain version.
Yeah. I have a friend who works for Discovery and he told me one time that he was shooting the bumpers for these Discovery shows. And so Brian said, we bring in all the cinematic cameras and everything else. And we create the flash that gets their attention. And then once you get connected to the character, they switch the style. Yeah. The style automatically goes to shoulder mount, handheld.
Yeah.
Because people don't care.
Yeah.
They want to take this journey with the character. And so getting into these documentaries, I found that with Rising from Ashes, it started with very cinematic stuff. And then once we got into the relationship with the character, saw their problem they were in their circumstance they were facing, the audience wanted to be with the character. Yeah. And you did that through the GoPro. And then you're able to kind of pull out and to show where they are in the process of getting there. And are they going to get there? And
I mean, I had two really, like, I wasn't going into something completely brand new, and there's so much value in that. It's like, make films that something you know about, you know? And that's a lot of beauty. I knew cycling. Now, did I know bike packing? No. But so it was just kind of a sense of like, I know cycling. I was a very serious cyclist for quite a few years, and I don't know bike packing. So it was like, I got to learn and understand, things that were happening. And that's part one. Part two was the kind of the system or the gear that I chose to do with this. Like, this is the most boiled down thing I'll probably ever do in my career. And I'm so thankful for that, because I mean, I just shot this. I didn't even shoot C-Log, it was just such a raw film. And I'm so glad that I kept it so minimal. I mean, there's clips of, I don't know if there's clips of me, but of me driving. And then I have the Canon, the R6 sticking out the window and I'm just driving slowly next to them. It's like these little things that there were so like little amount of variables that I was able to just like capture what's going on. And then you have a route like this where there's going to be natural obstacles. Yeah. So you marry the obstacles that they're facing with their personalities, the story is going to be there. You just have to be there as much as you possibly can. And when they're not, then that's when the GoPros come in. So if you can marry that system.
So there's a couple things is when I love what you said about telling stories about things that you know. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times when we make films, we tell people, well, tell me about you. What are your passions? What do you love? What do you what's your story? What's your background? Mm-hmm. That's typically where people are going to come alive. And you kind of, so a lot of people have a hard time. Mm-hmm. So like, why are we talking about this? I need to find a story idea. And I'm like, we're going to find it by you telling your story and us understanding who you are. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we're going to kind of start talking about some topics.
Right.
But when you know cycling, you're kind of walking into this film knowing that there's going to be mechanicals, that they're probably going to get saddle sores. They're probably going to be, there's going to be stuff that everybody cyclist is going to face. So how did that benefit you?
When you understand something where it's like, yeah, if I'm just there, things are going to happen. Shit's going to hit the fan. Like, that's just how life works. For them to do that route without anything happening, not possible. You can send a million people down that route and never one will come, unscathed. And so I knew that. I was like, I'm just going to be there every time I can. And then as a cyclist, like, okay, this is going to be really difficult. I know like this part of the route is just going to be brutal. Just be there. Just capture the emotion of what's going on. And then the personalities and then the dynamic between the two personalities. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's all just going to be organic. It's just going to show up, You
had talked about the two characters are kind of on two different journeys. Mm-hmm. And, I think you had said, there's a movie, City Slickers, and he said, life is about the one thing. And I mean, that ages me. Have you seen that movie?
No.
This is what I'm talking about. So, in City Slickers, it's the same thing. It's a narrative movie about three guys who go on a cattle drive and things go wrong and they've got to take over this cattle drive. And they're all facing their circumstances at home and trying to find their purpose. Mm. And one guy says, it's the one thing. And in your film, you have these two characters, and one figures out what the one thing is, and the other one is figuring out what the one thing is.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what was fascinating and something that we found more later in the edit, which is like one guy gets it halfway in, like he's kind of like almost ready to be done because he got it. He achieved already what he needed to achieve, which is like a self-reflection moment and then an action after. He's like, I already got it. One doesn't quite get it, and throughout the story. And then at the end, and then, into the end of the film, you can kind of see, some light bulbs going. But that's the beauty of it is like some people will just like get it and embrace it. And some people will struggle, opening their hearts to something like that. And that's another just beautiful thing that kind of happened, organically is, different personalities. One's going to perceive their circumstances differently than the other.
When you do documentaries, I think we make these relationships with these cast members and people don't realize that like we're friends with those people for life. Mm-hmm. And when the story ends or whatever we're doing ends, we know their journey continues, and that film, they will continue to self-reflect. So I think the thing is a lot of people don't realize that just because the light bulb didn't go on while we were there doesn't mean that it doesn't go on. Mm-hmm. It's just sometimes we need more time to process. And typically there's a lot of other things that aren't on the screen that are going on in these people's lives that are, that play a role in how they make their decisions and how they're facing things. Right. And, our historical story, it's like, what do we think is success? What do we have been told is success and all these different things. And then in the film, it just full kimono because you can't hide the truth of what's happening there. Right. And we all know those kind of human nature truths. And as documentarians, when we get that, like we all crave variety, but we desire consistency. Yeah. But we need variety or we go crazy. It's why people, it's Groundhog Day when people have kids and they're changing diapers and this, and then they go, I need a change. And, 5 guys go to Vegas and, one guy gets married and a tattoo of Mike Tyson on his face. It's like, we get it. You know what I mean? So but as you kind of look at all that, so you capture this whole story And, you know, one of the things I did want to mention is there's two types of stories. You know, you see something on Netflix where something happened and they're telling that story. And this is you're chasing the story.
Yeah.
And that's a lot different. And what are some things that you learned from chasing a story like this that were just practical for other filmmakers that are making movies? Like, what decisions did you make that?
There's two things. I mean, one was just trusting the process. I think when I remember, you know, calling different people or mentors and be like, I am stuck. I don't see it. Like, it's not developing the way I wish it would. And most of the advice I got was just be patient. You know, like when you're chasing something, it might take a lot longer than you think, and then you get discouraged and whatnot. But in my, you know, situation was you have this long route. Eventually, they're just going to break down. You know, like you just kind of have to play the time card. And I think that's a lot of what happens in a lot of stories is like you just kind of have to be patient and wait it out a little bit, and eventually they're gonna open up. And that can take a while. Also, just understanding that like keep the production light and just staying you know, quick on your feet and adapting every opportunity you can get, and then predicting as much as you possibly can. But I mean patience was probably what I learned most about that film.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people, I was talking to a filmmaker the other day, and he wants to do narrative. And I said, you should get into documentary, because the difference between documentary and some forms of documentary and narrative is we have to wait for the characters to encounter these situations that we know, like, oh, you're running out of water. I'll bet you're going to have headaches. I bet you might crash. Like, we kind of can predict it, where in narrative, you just write it on paper and you have them crash.
Right. Yeah.
So you can just tell the actor what to do. In documentary, we are casting people, and in some ways we're predicting what might happen, but that's the adventure of it, is that you don't know.
And for the filmmaker, I mean, that's why I love doc, and why I quickly realized is like in documentary, you're on an adventure with them. Like I had my own experiences. I had my own light bulbs and things like that. And, you know, you're also going through a transformative, you know, experience just like they are. And not only do you have to be, you know, reflecting yourself, but also capturing their reflection. Yeah. And I love, like, that was my favorite part about it, is after that, you know, ride, I had driven all of that. I mean, at that point, you know, I was over 3,500 miles at the end of that route, and I got up to like 6,000 miles of driving. That's a lot of time to reflect. And then you're going through, you know, rural Western United States. So it's like this kind of two things going on, is it's your own story and their story.
Well, I want to leave it there so we let the audience experience it without talking about it too much. And then you have all this footage.
Yeah.
And you've got to create this home movie.
Yeah.
So what did you do? I mean, how did you go about the process?
I bit off a lot more than I could chew. Like, it was supposed to be a 20, 30-minute little home video, basically, or whatever for the families. Maybe we'll throw it up somewhere and it would just be for fun. No
how many hours of footage?
A lot. I don't even remember, but it was a lot of footage.
Like 100?
Oh yeah.
How long is the film?
It's a 90-minute film.
Okay. So you got 90 minutes. So your ratio is, if you shot, you know, 200 hours, you've got to break that down and make a lot of creative choices of what's not going to go in there. So it's almost like sculpting and finding the story in the footage at this point. Right.
I mean, you do your very best to capture what's going on. And then in the edit, a lot of the times the story just came. And so what happened was I just started editing, you know, on my crappy little PC with the fans going nuts, you know, can't even read C-Log footage. I was like, you know, 10 minutes goes by, 20 minutes goes by, 30 minutes goes by. Next thing you know, I'm at like, my timeline is at 45 minutes. And I went, oh no, like this is a full movie. And I was like, I remember calling the guys and be like, all right guys, this is no longer a 20-minute film. Like, I'm just going to kind of run with this. And they're like, great. And
so they don't have any idea what's going on.
No, I mean, I just have this hard drive of a bunch of footage, and my job now is to put something together. It doesn't really.
Are they paying you?
No, I mean, this is just me cover my expenses, but I was just like, all right, now I'm going to just see where I go with this. Like,
okay. So from the business side,
there was no business.
so they pay you for this, but now you've got to, you know, that we say you can tell a story 3 times. You tell it in the script, you tell it in the production, and then you tell it in post.
Yeah.
So was there any discussion around, hey, I need some editing budget, or?
No, this was me, 19, 20-year-old me being like, all right, let's make a video,
So that's how green you are
Yeah.
at this. You really didn't know.
I mean, I have never made a video more than 5 minutes.
Okay. So you're 40 minutes into this cut.
Yeah.
How are you financing? I mean, I know you had a little film school money, but
I got to edit this movie and make some cash, like I don't want to just drain my pool. And if I want to keep doing traveling, I got to make something. So called my buddy Lucas up, our mutual friend, and was like, hey, I'm editing this movie, but I need a job. Like, I'm in Grand Junction. He lives in Buena Vista. She's like, 3 or 4 hours away from each other. And I was like, what do you got for me? He's like, oh, let me look around. Let me call a friend. Calls one of his friends. And he's like, hey, you want to frame a house for me? And I'm like, you have to make tough decisions. It's like, I want to go on this next trip, but I really don't want to frame a house.
Did you know how to frame houses?
No, I mean, my dad's been in construction forever, but I was like, is it just grunt? Like, do they just need a grunt? I don't know anything. And they're like, yep, let's do it. So moved over to Buena Vista. I was like, where can I stay? And he's like, hey, I got this big old RV, Winnebago or whatever they call those things. He's like, you want to stay in it? There's like, nope, there was electricity, but there was like no heating or anything. Winter is just about to start. And I set up my little laptop in this little camper and edited the film for a month straight and framed a house and lived in the back of my topper while I was doing this.
So how did you stay disciplined to?
Yeah.
I mean, after I've worked construction, you get home at night, you're done.
Yeah. I mean, I would just frame the house from, 8 to 5 or whatever it was. And then I'd get back and throw on a Netflix show and then start editing, and just, you have a responsibility. And I saw the film, was like, I love this film. I love how it's going. It's one of those, there's not a lot of projects when you're a filmmaker and you can just watch the edit over and over again because you're just so in love with how it's going. And that was what the case was. I was like, I am just so thrilled how this is coming together. So that was motivating. And I saw like potential in this. And, you have an audience of bike packers that will eat whatever you give to them. So the better you make it, the greater it will be.
Well, you kind of made a really cool business decision in there and most people don't do this. And I thought it was really interesting. You knew that there was a market for this film. You understood cycling and that demographic, and you understood that bike packers really like to watch this stuff.
Yeah.
So you knew not only that this was a good investment, but you knew there was a market for it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, there was one film on YouTube, 1.2 million views about, a certain story on the route. There was a GoPro, just a video of this guy, Ryan Van Duzer. I mean, I know you know who he is. He's
a friend.
Yeah. Just riding across, doing the Great Divide, and just GoPro footage. And it's just like this really raw story of him doing it. And it had another like million something views. So I was like, people love this route and they love this journey. And I was like, then it just became like the little competitive side of me, like, hey, let's try to like get up there with those films.
So you finished the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, were you thinking about marketing and distribution and film festivals and like, what did you?
No, again, so I'd never made a documentary. I've never made a film longer than 5 minutes. And so the idea of marketing and distribution, I didn't know what that was really. Like I was so new to this. I was sitting on a feature film, but I don't know what that means, Like I know it's a really great film. I've showed it to a few people and they're like, hey, this is really great. I'm like, oh, nice. But I don't know any more than that. And so a couple of the friends that I went with Costa Rica with are like, hey, we're going to move to South Africa. And I was like, oh, but I'm in the middle of whatever I got going on right now. But I was not done with my, traveling around and making that kind of content. I was like, I'm not done yet. Decided to, I'm going to move for 3 months with these couple guys to Cape Town, South Africa. But I wasn't finished with the film. So I moved to Cape Town, brought my hard drive with me, said I got first 2 weeks I'm here, I need to finish this film or it's never going to get done because I'm just going to get wrapped up into other stuff. Of course, ticked off my roommates who I was with because we just wanted to go out and have some fun, but I'm sitting there editing this bike film, and finished it to the best of my ability. I remember looking at that film and be like, I have done everything I know I can do, and then uploaded it to YouTube.
Okay. So you finished this film. You've taken months.
Oh yeah.
I remember seeing the first cut of this and seeing how you did the credits. And it was like just text on the screen. They were scrolling. They were just big. I mean, you were ready to be done.
I'm the farthest I can be in the world from where I live. I'm like, all right, let's post this thing and let's move on to the next thing. And
so wait, so you're sitting in this place in South Africa. Tell me about when you hit the button.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was like, I didn't even have a thumbnail. I was like, oh crap. I have a thumbnail for this giant feature film that's like, I think it was over 90 minutes of that cut. And, you know, I asked my friend who I was with at Cape Town, he's like, hey, would you want to help me make my thumbnail? I remember just being like, well, let's send it, and then published it. And then I remember being like, if this flops, that will suck. That's a lot of time. You know, I was like, if this doesn't go anywhere, I'll be bummed. But I was like, again, there was no expectations. I didn't have any really for myself. My expectations was I'm going to make the best film I possibly can. That's it. That's all I can do. That's all I can ask for myself.
So you hit the button, grabbed your camera, and just started going, hanging out and doing other stuff.
So for the next 10 days, I'm just doing my thing in Cape Town, South Africa with my friends. And then the graph starts going like this, just skyrockets. So in 10 days, we got like 170,000 views on a blank YouTube channel that's got 7 subscribers, you know, and it just blows up. I'm getting comments that I was just like, you know, one guy's like, I just bought a bike today because I saw your film. And I remember being like, oh, holy shit, what did I just do? You know, like that was the reality of it. And that's when I think a lot of like psychologically things start to change. Not because of the fame of the project, but because you realize you just made an actual impact. You're like, holy cow, I actually just made something that an audience of people can actually walk away with something and learn.
Well, we always say, you know, if a film just educates you, it's one thing. If it just entertains you, it's one thing. But when it inspires you and you feel something, and you know, it's when you cry or you laugh or you tell somebody about it or you laugh about that film later. It's like, that's when you really get to the heart of being a documentary filmmaker, you touch someone in a way that they were able to connect with something that sparked them, that brought life to their soul. You know, like it was one of those films where I was just like, I could watch myself a few times because I just enjoyed it so much and I knew other people would. I just was like, well, I hope they find it. There was no marketing, you know, behind it. The marketing was the YouTube algorithm, and that's it. And one post on my Instagram saying it's available now, you know, that's it. And then it just skyrocketed. And, you know, that's where I remember realizing like, holy cow, this was something I actually did something, you know, I didn't just, you know, make little fun brand content. Like this is something that I can look back on and be like, that's a big boy. And I just really am so fortunate that I had that opportunity to do that film. And so what happened? Yeah. So we're 10 days into this thing, and a mutual friend of Chris Schmidt, one of the writers, his name is Michael, has his own production company in Pasadena or LA, and reached out and said, hey, you have a really good movie. What we recommend you do, so you should take that down. Let's partner on this thing and let's take this to the next level. And again, I'm super ignorant in everything film. You know, I had to make a decision. I said, this is really awesome to have on YouTube. But I was wise enough to know that numbers don't really matter in that sense. I was like, feels really good. But if I want to make a career and take, you know, the arts or the film or photography, any of that serious, these are little opportunities that you just have to like go after. He reached out and said, you know what? We had a meeting, and he's like, hey, we want to partner in this thing. We believe in this. Like, and I didn't know them very well, but there was something about, you know, those, you know, the way they gave off energy or whatever, and definitely God thing where it was like, this is an opportunity that I can take, my next big step. And we took it down, and I decided to partner with Lunar Door. Documentary films, it's like we go out and we manufacture stuff. So we kind of come back with this big piece of clay, and then we start to carve it away. Yeah. But the great thing is that it's wet clay. And so you can put stuff back and you can remold it. And some things like they just don't work, but they just need to be reshaped.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of docs fail. You and I have talked about this, is because they only see it through their perspective. The filmmaker makes it, they edit it, they do all that stuff, and they go in, they know what's going on in front of the camera, they know what's going on behind the camera, that they were hungry, all these different things. And so they shape the scene, not from the truth of what's just on the screen. And so they can't put the things together to make a compelling story, because they're bringing all this other stuff into it.
And I think what I also kind of realized that I look back on, and I'm like, when you look at your career, like from a really far point, I'm 3 years in, I don't even have one yet, but basically what happens is you look back and like, there's certain people that believed in you. So you're one of them. Those guys were one of them. Like, there's certain people and certain steps in your career where people were like, we want to partner with you or help you take your career to the next level. And that was one of those opportunities. So and I think every filmmaker who takes that serious will have that. All my friends who have, pursued this like I have in maybe different avenues, but someone came along in their journey and be like, hey, I love what you're doing. Let's connect and let's do this thing together. And that was that for me, for those guys.
I would also say a lot of filmmakers get calls like that who have done it, and the other side of the coin is the other person doesn't want to work for it. Like, they don't, it is a effing grinder to get to that point.
Yeah.
And it shows, but then all of a sudden when they do get to partner, it's a 1 + 1 = 10.
Yeah.
And so these guys saw some potential in something. They partnered with you. You saw that they were people of character, competency, commitment, communication. Yeah. And so that you knew that they were a good fit. And then you guys worked together to reshape the film, to shoot some more interviews.
So we were like, this is a piece, it's a mold, it's a big old amount of clay. Like, it's somewhat of a shape, but like, let's actually like carve this thing and make it the very best film possible. And so, I went up and shot a whole scene in Banff, Canada. So I left Cape Town, South Africa a month early and went out and shot it. It didn't actually end up staying in the film, but we like actively pursued how can we take this thing up to another level. And I had to make a creative decision to redo all of the post interviews, which was a huge, like, somewhat of a gamble. Like, you have this piece of content that people loved, but you have to be brave enough to kind of strip some stuff away and then put it back and, hope that it's better. But I believed that it would. And so, we partnered and we redid the interviews and, used sound bites from the old one. But, I think storytelling was my weakness at that time, still is in some ways. And they came in and I said, my requirement, if we want to partner on this thing, I want someone to watch every single clip that I shot. And they honored that.
Well, you know what I loved about those guys, and I haven't met them yet, but what I loved about what they did is they put their money in, they put their time in, and then they put their talent in.
Yeah.
It's time, treasure, talent.
Yeah.
Some guys just want to pay for it and they're going to offload it to a friend. Those are your business guys that see things. But these guys really do love this film. And then when they would put the hours into the edit and then seeing them go out and record the sound effects and things, like they're into it.
Right.
Like, they really do want this to be great beyond just, this isn't a business opportunity for them.
Definitely a legacy piece for at least me and I think them. I think that's how they would definitely see it. Yeah. And so what happened was I was like, this is someone has to go in. I edited it, but someone else has to. So Michael and our editor Keith spent 30 days, 8 hours a day, and looked at every piece of thing I shot, look at the edit. They had conversations for 6 hours on story, and really just kind of came in and see, because I was so close to it. Like, it's like you're in a dark room. You can't see anything anymore. And I needed someone to come in and just see the pieces I missed. And then they would, call me up and be like, there's so much awesome gold, that you didn't even put in yet. So just wait until, and that's what happened. And I had to let go like that. I remember being like, I sent off the hard drive with all the footage. And I said, like, if I want this to be great, as a director, I have to trust the team. And that's what happened. I just trusted the process and sent cuts back and make sure I'm happy with what I was seeing. And some of it I wasn't. And we had a lot of, when you're working with a team over a course of a couple of years, you're going to have TIFFs and things like that. And all of us just like understood that finish line and the product and always got past it.
Yeah. On a business side, so career path wise, what people may or may not know is that when you get into the editing phase, so you go through your idea phase, then you go into your development phase, then you go into your pre-production, your production, post-production. Now you're in post-production. People don't know there's these big lag times when you work with editors. So there's things that you kind of just have downtime.
Yeah.
So you're still learning, still wanting to grow. You still have your Instagram influencer vibe going. And so in that interim, you kind of took those skills from these other things and found some influencer and then went and shot another film.
What happened was Trace and Divide, it's going through this process. But I told myself, if I don't do something now and go after the next project, no matter how big or small, there's going to be a lot of like imposter syndrome. There's going to be a lot of mental stuff that you're going to have to overcome, because it's like you can have this one great project, but if you don't keep pushing, you're going to get locked up and frozen. And so there's this guy on Instagram, like my mom basically just sent me an Instagram reel of this guy hanging out with this cheetah in South Africa. That was it. I was just like, there's one video of him with a bunch of meerkats all over him with millions of views. And I went, huh, like I'm familiar with South Africa. I kind of understood some, and I was like, this is fascinating. Where's his email?
Seriously.
That's it. Found his email. Like I looked up I found his like little photography, website, found his email and just said, hey, this is super cool. I love what you're doing. Can I come out and let's film and like, let's create, basically it was supposed to be just a proof of concept, but like, let's just go out and film and see what's there,
Yeah.
And he said, great, let's do it. And I went, oh man. So we had meetings. I found a little bit of a small team that would do this with me, and hopped on a plane on January 1st last year to the middle of nowhere in South Africa to go after this next film.
Okay, so that film, what was the budget on it?
As cheap as possible. So
like, how much money do you have in that movie?
I mean, the production was probably like $5,000, maybe not even.
Is that including plane tickets?
Yeah.
So one of the things that keeps coming up on this show is that people think that there's a bunch of money in it. There's no money in it. We take a loss. It's a scrappy job. You just have to figure out if you love it or not.
You play your cards, as best as you can.
But I remember we had met through a mutual friend. You were shooting movies and I was shooting in the dirt, and I needed a drone pilot and I'd seen your reels. So you came down to shoot on that, and then some B cam, and then eventually we're shooting A cam as you just continue to grow as a cinematographer. But one of the things that we did one night was there was our film crew was there, and you said, will you guys watch this? That movie started, the one you showed us was 44 minutes.
Yeah. So,
and you're trying to figure out if you're going to make it into another feature.
Yeah, it was really, really torn. So I went out, we filmed for 4.5 days, got as much footage as we possibly can, and came home, and I was like, I just did what I did with Trace and Divide, basically, was like, get the footage you got and just see where it kind of leads you. And I had a really, really long extra cut that was just super raw, but of a 45-minute cut. I said, hey, I need someone, again, to see what I'm not seeing and to see which direction I should be going with this. Again, I think a lot of filmmakers, they just get so attached to it that they get phrased up again. And I showed it to you and your wife and Tim, and just like, oh boy, I got to show it to someone, and showed it. And then first thing was like, all right, let's make this into a 14-minute short.
Well, but it was a longer conversation. But what we realized was there wasn't enough story arc for 90 minutes. There wasn't enough journey that this guy was on.
No.
And as we talked through it and then talked about the market, that if you really wanted to get a win, that a shorts category at a film festival would really be a good placement for kind of this type of story.
This type of film, yeah. And it was never, for me, like I was so in love with this story and Christina and Nick, the subjects of the film or the cast. But it was more of like, I just need to pursue the next thing and learn. Like you can't stop. Like you got to keep pushing for it. I was okay. I was like, it sucks. Like I like want to do a feature, right? You want the next big thing. But I was like, if that will actually shoot myself in the foot, so let's keep this as short and as powerful and impactful as possible. Yeah, we just cleaned it up to as the 14-minute cut that we have today.
And so then you ended up taking that was, you had never done film festivals outside of?
No, never done a film festival, but I was like, this is a good enough film that I can really experience this now. What happened was I finished it and I was like, of course, you're researching all the festivals, and I found the one I wanted, which was the Hawaii International Film Festival. Why? I wanted to go to Hawaii. You know, that's just the truth of it. But it fit that
Had
festival.
you been to Hawaii?
No. No.
This is another influence. This is
a little bit. I was like, oh man, it'd be so nice to be on the beach surfing again. You know, I was like, but I was like, how can I justify it? You know? So also the festival really worked well. Like what I had researched, like they had an environmental section. I was like, this, and it's an Academy Award qualifying festival. Like this is the one I want.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a whole other discussion, Academy qualifier. So,
right.
But what people need to know is when something's Academy that means it's a really good festival.
Yeah. You know, it's momentum. It's taken serious, things like that.
Yeah. So you apply, you get in.
Well, this is where, again, where you're learning, you're surrounding yourself with people who just know. We had talked. I said, you know, I've never done a festival. How am I supposed to get into these things? You know, like I think this film is a great short, but that doesn't, there's other 2,000 other great shorts. So we had talked and you're like, hey, just call him. And so what happened was I called, got that festival programmer who's doing the shorts somehow, and just chatted about the film. And I just was like, I really love your guys' festival and what I see. I want a world premiere there. And I said those 2 words and immediately got taken serious, I guess, in some sort of way. It's like, oh, this kid actually like wants to be here, and this isn't just like a blind submission. What happens is you submit to 50 different festivals and just see what happens. Well, I really wanted this one. And so that, they're like, oh yeah, this is great. I loved the film, and I don't know if we can get in or not, but thanks for submitting it. And we hung up. Yeah. Got in an email a couple weeks later and said, hey, you're in. And I was like, oh yeah.
Wow.
First festival,
So you got to rock the red carpet. You went to all the dinners and.
Yeah. Like that was super. I'll look back on that for the rest of my life and be like, that was one of the craziest, most amazing experiences ever. Cause it was like, I understood festivals. It's an expensive game. I was like, this is my first one. So, I mean, again, as cheap as possible, went over there, crashed at a hostel and surfed. And so I'm in a hostel and then I'm getting ready for the red carpet in this hostel. And people are like, what are you doing? And there's like these Australian girls and like this one guy from Denmark, and they're like, what are you? And there's just me, in a red tie and stuff, and like headed off with my nice dress shoes and filmmaker's badge and stuff. And, just walked in, and it was just like the most amazing thing. And then what I realized was the only reason I got here was that micro decision to call. Because a guy came up to me and of course asked me what I'm doing. I was like, where's the open bar? I was like, and we talked about it a little bit, and he's like, man, you got struck by lightning. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we had so many short submissions. It was physically not possible to watch them all. We're talking thousands and thousands. You just submitted on Film Freeway? I went, yep. He's like, you lucky guy. And I was like,
as people become and start to look at it as a career, it's all relationships. Mm-hmm. And a festival director and a festival programmer, they have a role. They run a business. Their business is creating a slate of great films that entertain audiences, that uplift the mission and vision of that film festival, and honor corporate sponsors that help put that thing together at scales like that. Mm-hmm. And your film, it's not just the film that people are submitting. They're submitting all their marketing materials. Mm-hmm. They're submitting all these other things that set that festival up for success.
Right.
And they want to be surrounded by good people. Like, who wants to spend a week with a jerk? Like, it's like.
Absolutely. Everyone was so nice. And I think that's for a reason, like, especially at that caliber. I mean, like, I really just enjoyed the people that went, and everyone was so hungry. Shorts is full of a lot of younger people, at least what I found. And what happened is like everyone's just hungry, and then you get to surround yourselves around people who are in the same boat as you.
Well, you're at the same caliber.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is unsaid a lot, is that you don't go to a film festival and network. You're networking with people who have performed at a level that you perform.
Yeah.
And, it's like you and I have talked about it. You never want to partner with people below you.
Yeah.
Because you end up being a teacher the whole time, and it's draining, versus being at a festival, you meet people. They got a submission. They got there. They had to figure out what their screening time was. They had to figure out what the audience liked and didn't like. They had to go through the fear of getting up in front and doing the Q&A and blowing it or doing it well. And so you have all this shared success that kind of makes it easier to partner.
Yeah.
Because you're working with people that are at your level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think for younger guys and girls who were kind of in my boat, like it was so valuable to go to a festival like that. Again, jumping in the deep end, like, you know, we got on the panel, totally botched it. I mean, I went, never done a panel, never, I've talked, right? Did my thing.
Why do you think you botched it?
Well, botch is a strong word, but definitely didn't do great. Because I was like, you're speaking in front of people. You don't know I didn't really know what they were wanting from me. It's like, do I need a short response? Do I need a long response? You know, I said my thing, handed over to this seasoned veteran. You could tell she's been doing this for years. She kicked my ass and I went, shit. I was like, that's how it's supposed to be done. But then I'll always, so like when the real big things happen with like Trace and Divide, I understand, but you kind of just have to like do it, you know, those type of things. You can prepare in front of your mirror forever, but until you're in front of a stage after your film, can't get that same experience. And so that's also like, and then, so it was like, yes, I get to go to Hawaii and surf and hang out in the hostel, but I had to like go through a festival at that high end before I go through like stuff with Trace and Divide, you know, like that's another thing that filmmakers have to understand is like your film's one part of it. You can be the craziest, awesome director and shooter ever, but if you can't like, you know, be an awesome human at these festivals and like market your film and be friends with all the other filmmakers and network, you're just going to like shoot yourself in the foot. But you can't really learn that part of it until you just start doing it. And so I went by myself, went to every networking event. I struggle with networking. Like it is the most exhausting, hard thing ever. You're like, so then you realize like everyone's here in the same boat. You know, everyone's at their open bar, grabbing their little, you know, martini or whatever, walking around. And you just go up to everyone. And then Hawaii, if you don't know, which I didn't know, has a huge Asian American culture. A lot of Japanese coming. So there's a lot of Japanese filmmakers. You just go up and then you're like, oh, you don't speak English? Next thing you know.
Really?
Yeah, it was a lot of that. And so, which was so fun because then you realize, oh, we're all in the same boat. So you just go up to the next person, the next person, the next person, and you just keep meeting as many people. And then you find out the little networking things. You're like, you got to be holding a drink. You got to come up with your closing statement to get out of the situation. Like,
do you hit any talkers?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you're like, oh, you're looking at, you know, you're like totally, but that was like, I think that's just another like networking and marketing is something I've never had to really deal with until you're forced to do it. And that's what happened. And,
it's a people business.
Totally. And then you become so refilled, you know, like that's what I found with these festivals, especially. It's like, I think festivals are really tricky these days, but the one thing I found was you can go and you can fill your cup. Like you can be around people who, I mean, there's a lot of people who were in the same boat. We're like, we don't know what the hell we're doing.
Oh man. There was a couple years ago, we were in a lull and we did this film. And so we flew to the film festival. I won't say which one it was, but we went, and my buddy and I both had films in that film festival, my producer, Greg. And so he said, let's just go together. So we flew out there and we were both just exhausted. I'd had a feature that fell through. It was just like a time where I just needed a win. Mm-hmm. And they had this big filmmaker party with this open bar and the DJ was horrible. And so he left to go to the bathroom. We turned that place upside down. It became so fun, but we kind of went pretty hard that night. It was a big night, but people were like, you guys need to come back next year. And we're like, are you guys making a film? If you're not coming, just come back. I mean, that place, it got a little, but yeah. I came home and I was like, you know what? That's part of the lifestyle of filmmaking is that we don't just go to festivals as a business. You go to be in community with people that value the things that you appreciate and love. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like at those festivals, I love going to movies and I love getting a big thing of popcorn and going to the shorts and going to see that feature that people are talking about and then walking up afterwards and saying, this is a great movie. Thank you. And it's like, but I've been in their shoes, you know, I'm 50 and they're, you know, 25 in that same situation. And so it's like, you have a long road, but before we close this one up, I want to talk about Tracing the Divide. So that film is being finished now. Yeah. You all have seen the trailer. That thing is about to release. Your world premiere at the Mammoth Film Festival. Yeah. So we'll be premiering at the Mammoth Film Festival and, just so excited. Like if you saw the rough cut, you know,
and you really enjoyed it, you're going to lose your mind. I mean, it is such an amazing movie now. And that's not because of me and just me. It's because of the partnering up thing. The guys, Michael, Keith, Maya, all those guys, and Chase, they put all their cards on the table and said, we're in it. So we have taken that movie from here to here, and just so excited to just show this film to people, and to show that like you can have a midlife purpose, and look at your life and be like, we need a challenge, like force yourself to have a challenge. And I'm really excited to watch the audience and have those gears start to turn. But yeah, we'll be premiering at Mammoth, and then just stay tuned to see where you can watch it and what city it will get to.
Yeah, because it'll do a film festival run.
Yep.
Simultaneously, you guys are talking with distribution.
Yep.
And then the world will get to see it in some form or fashion.
Yep.
If people want to stay in touch with the film and with you and those things, where can they put their email in for updates and those things? Like, how do they get a hold of you? And then I've got one more question before we go.
Yeah. So you can always, if you want to reach out to me, Jack Zakrajsek, or Jack Zakra, Jack Zakra on Instagram. My DMs are always open. You can also go to the Tracing the Divide website. So tracingdivide.com. Of course, you got all that. You can fill out all your contact info or reach out, or if you, whatever. And then you can also reach out to my personal website and learn more about both films. The Wild Connection, the cheetah film that we've been working on, jackzakrajsek.com. So those 3 places you can go and figure out anything you need.
Great. I'll put all those in the show notes in the description on YouTube, so you can find Jack directly. The last thing I was going to ask is, if people want to work with you is one thing, you're available.
Yeah.
If they want to work with somebody who does the kind of work that you do, but what's your dream project?
Oh man. My dream project are adventure films. Like most of them I'm always interested in, where it's films that, not only is the filmmaker going on a kind of a crazy adventure and having their own experiences, but also documenting other people. I can't really answer my dream film. That's like, there's just too many like ideas I have, for something like that. But I do want to keep pursuing like the adventure cycling in some ways, some aspects as well. But to also do adventure stories outside of the US. I have a huge desire to kind of bring a light, like that light kind of rig and like that, run and gun style to different parts of the world where you can document certain people having different journeys and cultures and lifestyles. And I have some ideas on how that's going to look right now that I haven't said anything yet. And I'm going to keep that way at the moment, but just really diving into different cultures and adventures throughout the world.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Till next time.